Poddin My Noggin, hosted by CK Sims, creating a platform to elevate, educate, and heal by creating a space where people can share their stories of struggle, triumph, and redemption. CKS Media.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Poddin My Noggin. We are here this week with, I don't want to say this right off the cuff, but could be one of my new favorite authors, author D.H. Morris. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Curtis. I'm so happy that you asked me to join you today.
Well, the pleasure is mine. So you are the author of this incredible book that I've done very well not to crinkle because it's going to live on my screen. Now, full disclosure, I've been doing this podcast now for coming up like a year and a half. So, and a lot of people have sent me books, right, that I get to read. And I have learned that I'm not allowed to read the entire book before I have an interview because I give out spoilers. And I don't want to do that, but I get really excited about material. And then I'm like, and so there, I had an author on last year. And I gave away the whole book. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just said that. Like, yeah, I can't believe you just said that either. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'll edit it out. And so I only read about 2/3 of the book and then keep it for after the interview to finish. But I will say this, I'm not really usually one that would pick up a book like this, to be honest. So what's interesting about it is that it's so shiny too. Just look how beautiful the picture is. What's interesting about it is if I went into a bookstore, The Girl of Many Crowns may not have initially captured my interest. I'm a suspense thriller type person. However, I will tell you that that's an injustice. And I think a really greater life lesson. Don't judge a book by its cover, for once. And we should try and be diverse in everything that we're reading, because I've thoroughly enjoyed this particular book. And I have questions. I've prepared some questions, which is something else I don't often do. I prefer more of an organic conversation. However, there's some things I want to ask as we go. But take us back. So you are going D.H. Morris, and that is your pen name, correct?
Correct.
And what would you like me to refer to you as today?
DH is fine because my given name is so common that people have a hard time finding the book. But if they put it under D.H. Morris, it's the only one, which is why I chose that as the pen name rather than my given name, Deborah. There are a lot of Deborah Morrises out there, surprisingly, and several of them are authors.
Really? Okay, that's interesting. My legal name is Curtis Sims, and there are a few. One in particular is convicted and in prison for murder. Not me, but if someone were to Google me, this Curtis Sims fella, and they Google, this is one of the top things that come up. And I'm like, oh, well, that's interesting. I need to, hopefully work on my SEO and make sure that I come up and not the other guy. So, but okay, so let's go back to, I want to talk about the book, but I want to know what brought you to writing a book first, and this in particular.
Well, this is actually one of my ancestors. And when I got married many years ago, my aunt, who is the family genealogist, gave me as a present a huge family tree and group sheets and family charts that went back 1,000 years, basically. And as I was looking at it, I noticed that this person, it looked like there was a mistake there to me, because this young girl named Judith was married at the age of 12. And then she shows up again on my chart, being married to the son a year and a half later, or 2 years later. And then a few years later, she shows up married to someone completely different. And I'm thinking, there's a mistake here. I need to find this mistake and correct it. Instead, I found a story that kind of haunted me for several decades. And then COVID came, and as a lot of us were, I guess, confined during COVID, and I just felt like all this time she was saying, write my story, write my story. And so I just spent a lot of time during COVID doing research and writing. And initially, the book was much longer, and it was written like a history book because it was based off of old records that were kept in the 9th century. And so I was trying to be exactly true to the facts. And then I realized if I want anyone to read this, I need to take out everything that they didn't absolutely have to know and, add some dialogue and make it read more as a historical fiction. And that way people could learn her story and learn the facts. And I think they're amazing. She has an amazing story. And I felt very honored to be able to share it.
So, two things then, because now my wheels are turning, right? So, getting the backstory is really interesting. Um, so it is historical fiction because like it's a lot of facts, but there's a story woven in there.
And it's historical fiction because most of the dialogue is made up. I made up the dialogue. I know what happened, the
Mm-hmm.
events that happened, but I have to project how she felt about those events and what she said during those events. And it's
That's
also not
yeah.
just
So
her story.
no, it's not just her story. So what's really interesting too, though, is that you talked about how the book was much longer, right? And
Mhm.
you did an incredible amount of research, and that
Yes.
you sort of had to take out a lot of the historical sort of fact, whatever, and add some dialogue. But you still retained, like, it still reads. So this answers another question, like this organic conversation. Because, like, for me, when I'm reading it, I'm having this experience of like, it's like this author was alive during this time with the very vivid details that you provide, uh, like structurally, the scenes, the settings, all of that sort of thing. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, I don't know that much about, say, medieval times or like the Viking times, like those particular things. And so, but when I'm reading it, I feel like I'm being transported somewhere that's not here today. And I had the thought in my mind that either this person did an extraordinarily deep level of research or they are just very committed to creating an environment that is believable. Like either one could be true. Like because I don't know the difference. So to listen to what you just said about during the pandemic, and then and that you spent a lot of time researching, and you have the the word genealogy, all of those things that you were gifted. So the stuff that I'm reading in here, the very detailed and beautiful, might I add, scenic images that I formed in my head from all of what you've wrote in here. So these are historical.
Yes. Um, the monks of that day kept annals, and they listed year by year what happened, things of note that happened in the kingdom. They almost never wrote about women unless they did something extremely shocking to them, I guess. And so she shows up, and also we see the story. There's a side story also of her cousin and his wife, and he's trying to divorce her. That was a big scandal of that day. There are a lot of writings from the character named Hinkmar, who is the chief counselor to King Charles, and almost everything was in Latin. I don't read Latin, but I do read German. A lot of it was translated into German. We also have some wonderful medieval historians who specialized in King Charles and his life, the father of Judith. And so, I mean, everything down to the laws that were passed in that day, the place it occurred, when they were having their assemblies and passing the laws. I just went to the records, found what laws were passed, when that was held, where the assembly was held. And every time we came to a new place, now I lived in Europe for 12 years, but I wasn't writing the book at the time. So I had some picture in my mind of a number of the places, but not from 1,000 years ago. So I had to do research. Let's say Le Mans. When we go to Le Mans, I had to research what was Le Mans like in the 9th century, not what it's like today, which is very different. And so, yes, there was a lot of research that there was not a place that I didn't do as deep a dive as I possibly could into what it was like during the 9th century. And I'm so glad that you do get that sense of realism and some of the conversations that are in the book were basically taken right out of the historical records even. And yes, you could do a spoiler on this book, but it wouldn't be as bad because these are all historical figures and they're all historical fact pretty much. So, I mean, I filled in a few gaps with a few holiday celebrations, and then I looked up how did they celebrate that in the 9th century, and took accounts of celebrations of the 9th century in France or in England and how they did that, and then just wove that into the book so that it would be as true to fact as I possibly could be.
It is. So there's a couple things that are coming up for me. So at the moment, like, it's evident that you took great care in how you presented the time, the environment, the people, even in this book, right? Like, there seem to be, now that you're filling in some gaps and some questions and things like that, it's like, okay, it's so interesting. I would be remiss not to sort of call out how eerily there are some strange correlations in this historical fiction book with our current time, right? So I think as I was reading, I was having moments of like, well, we're kind of seem to be heading in this direction a little bit right now, or that could potentially happen today, which I hope it doesn't. I hope things get better. I have to hope, or I would fall into despair, right? But that's a really interesting tie-in as well that probably wasn't on purpose at all, but it just turns out to be what it is. What so yeah, I have so I'm mindful of time, but I'm also like my mind's spinning, right? So like connecting dots in real time as we're having this conversation. Um, so it happened in the pandemic. You started your research. So how many years did it take you? Because I feel like this book was only released, what, if I
It was
remember,
released
last
last
year?
fall. Yeah,
Last fall, yeah. So it's not
yeah.
been out for even a full year yet. So how long did the research take to culminate into this very lovely written book?
Well, I had started the research probably 30 years before, and I had gathered it. And then my husband says, "Oh, I think I still have that." Because I said, maybe I should, because I kept feeling, yes, you should write her story. She deserves to have her story told. And then I started from there and just went. And I took a year probably to finish the research and the initial draft. And I approached a few um, people in the publishing industry, and the first thing they wanted me to tell them was tell them three other books that my book was exactly like. And if I couldn't, and it had to be ones that had just been published, then they were not interested. And they said, who cares about a princess from France? Who cares? And I thought, well, I can't think of anything that was published that was recently that was exactly like that. So I put it on the shelf for a couple of years, actually. And then it felt like Judith wouldn't leave me alone. So I just went back and that's when I started my revisions and tried to turn it into something that would be accessible to a reader of historical fiction, and decided to go. I wasn't going to fight the powers that be, and we have it published through a small publishing company.
But okay, you have a publisher or a small publishing company, but
It
and I
just,
don't
yeah.
know. So question for you then: Did you was this a book specifically for me, or was this the book?
You mean the signature, or
Yeah, yeah. There's like
yes?
it says May Baldwin's strength and Judith's courage inspire your own journey.
That's what I
DHYs.
hope this book will do for you and anyone else who I it's not on every book. I mean the book,
Okay, so I
but
but
when
also I
I
got a bookmark and this.
yeah, I sent that out to those who wanted a copy from the podcasters who wanted a copy.
Well, it's beautiful. Like the presentation's beautiful. And I think ultimately, you released it when it was time, right? Like you had tried to court some publishers. The request for, three books that has done well that are almost identical to the book that you're writing. They're just playing safe, right? It's the numbers game. Could they get a potential bestseller? Could they, move books? It's all those things. But what I find is people have gone so far to the money, just to the numbers, that the art and a good book may never find it to the market simply because it's something different than what's, like making, the number one New York Times bestselling list at this moment. But so, okay, so we got the book published. It's beautiful. I love the simplicity of the black. To be honest with you, was this your vision? The cover?
Yes, yes. I worked with um, a company that designed it for me, but they had a different vision, and I wanted just the weight of the crown, which actually you see on everybody, not just Judith, on every single royal in there. There's this duality. It's the beauty and the richness of their environment, and then this weight of the responsibility. And you can see it kind of reflected. There's a reflection that shows that's the many crowns on the cover. It's not
Well, I will
something
say to
I would
you,
aspire to be is a royal, because after doing the research, I like my life private and just the way I want to do it. It's
exactly, yes. People never, they always think, I think they always think that if you're royalty, then you have the most blessed life. That's not
Mhm.
true because you have to look at all of the responsibilities and all of the expectations. Like, you don't get to live your life for you. And we've seen that unfold now in even recent time with like Prince Harry and all of that sort of thing. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So, the book, before we pop to break, I just want to say that I love the book cover as well. It's simple and elegant, great for sticking to your guns because I think that
Thank you.
it lands really well and really beautifully. We're going to take a quick break and we're going to come back and we're going to talk about more of the characters in D.H. Morris's The Girl of Many Crowns. We'll be right back.
Partner today with CK Sims and Poddin My Noggin to get in front of an audience that cares. You will be supporting mental health stories, tales of resilience, and uplifting content, aligning your brand with bringing goodness, authenticity, and kindness front and center. This spot could be yours. Do you have a story of struggle and resilience? One that you want to share with others and possibly help someone through their own struggles? Find the link in the show description and fill out the guest form today.
Welcome back, everybody. Before the break, we have been talking to the lovely D.H. Morris about her book, The Girl of Many Crowns. We talked about how she got here and how the book came to be, and how, interestingly enough, that this is really a true story with small embellishments,
That's right.
right? So,
That's right.
and so I have some questions I want to ask now because, so you repeated several times in the beginning of this interview and throughout like the first segment that you really wanted to tell her story, right? Judith's story. She's the princess. She's the daughter of Charles. Um, but yet you chose to write the book through the voice of a character named Baldwin. Talk
Well,
about that. Can you tell me about it?
I tried to start the book several times from Judith's standpoint. And whenever Baldwin came in, I had to go back and redo a lot of the story. It just was not coming together. And then I realized this is not just Judith's book, it really is Judith and Baldwin's book because it's their story. And their stories run parallel to each other so that we know what's going on in Britain and we know what's going on in France, and we don't have to lose any of that history or that backstory. We also have the story from Hinkmar, the counselor's point of view, so that we know what's going on with the king and his close inner circle. And then later, and maybe I'm giving a spoiler myself, but it's history, and I wouldn't be here if Baldwin and Judith didn't get together eventually. And
Fair.
when they join forces, and he helps her escape from the palace, then it just becomes the dual story, one from the king's standpoint through Hinkmar's voice, and one really from the couple's voice. So it really is their book. And the interesting thing about that is I've always seen it from Judith's standpoint. But when my husband read it and my son read it, they said, well, this really isn't Judith's story. This is Baldwin's story. And I was surprised. I thought, well, that's perfectly valid. it really is their story. It's the family story. It's even King Charles' story.
Well, I think yes, because you can go very much through the looking glass, if you will, with any of these particular characters. What was interesting to me, though, is because I assumed, of course, and from the get go, that Baldwin and Judith were going to end up. There was just like a something there, essentially, if you will, that kind of just like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what's like just how he spoke or viewed Judith specifically, but then also his loyalty to the king, right? That was a very interesting duality as well because he had a sacrifice to make in that process. So I kind of always assumed right from the get go that they were going to be together, and I wanted this as well. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but what I found really interesting was I think I liked how the book is Judith's story, but told through the eyes of someone who loves her.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really beautiful how that comes across. And it's like this muted sort. I don't have the words to describe like the kind of like the beauty to it. It's a very muted beauty, if you will. And this is my take is that it's like you can tell the restraints, right? And you can tell that there was so many other layers. It wasn't as easy as that there was this love quietly growing. It wasn't sensational, if you will. It wasn't over the top. So
Mm-hmm.
this is why I use the word muted. And then there was this emotional depth that really kind of made you understand sort of why they were rooted so deeply in like different things. And then for me, I love Judith because she defied what was expected of her in that time. And back to the and I will continue reading it because I want to know all of the things. But back to like current day revelations and correlations, right? Like defying authority, defying expectation, having to go through great lengths to carve out her path. And I know that we've seen such great movement in the right direction for women finding equal space and ability. But like I'm with bated breath this moment, like thinking we could go back 50, 60 years with current administration and like we can't allow that to happen. So where's our Baldwin right now, if you will, that's gonna help us escape the castle? Does that make like you know what I mean? But anyway, so my next question, no, that's not, you already answered that question. So my other next question was about like the banquet halls and the feast, the religious ceremonies, and they're very authentic. They feel very like real. But you've spoken to this already, so you, like I said, our organic conversation was answering those. So it's not about arc or what inspired her arc, I really truly know now. My question was Judith's journey from pawn to autonomous agent is pretty central to this story, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
Um,
absolutely.
and so the question, what inspired her arc, especially within the constraints of her era, isn't really accurate because the arc wasn't inspired by D.H. Morris, but really an arc path, if you will, that Judith had to follow.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that
It,
at all?
well, I I felt that her journey, well, and I think as you finish the book, I don't know how far you got into the book. I don't know if she's on her second marriage or not. I think the second marriage was a catalyst for one thing. The first marriage, her husband was a kind fatherly figure. She said in one of the sources that I read He always treated me like a father. So I tried to portray that. He was a kindly and very, very spiritual, religious man. I'm not Catholic. So that was another area that I had to really do a deep dive into, not just how Catholics celebrate now, but how did they celebrate in the 9th century? And what were their feelings? And I was surprised by how religious people were then, how important it seemed to be a real huge deal to them. Everything surrounded their belief in God or their loyalty to the church. And the thought of losing your right to membership in the church was huge. It even controlled kings. If a pope were to say, I'm going to excommunicate you, that was a big deal. They might even lose their right to rule. So these are all subjects and themes that run through the book as well. But I think her second marriage begins to be a catalyst. She's starting to get to mature a little. She's now a teenager. She's now had some property that she's owned. And she realizes that there are things worse than whatever her father can do to her. And maybe that is being married to someone who would not treat her well. And she would rather, she has to get to the point where she would rather be in prison for the rest of her life than live a life that her father had chosen for her that she did not want. She develops a backbone of steel, and it's through her adversity. And I think that's a journey that we all go on. And our adversity either makes us stronger, or as they say, or you succumb and you fall apart. But you have to find that steel within you, whether it comes from your faith, whether it comes from just a place, a quiet place within yourself, kind of like Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind, who will not be taken down. She refuses to be hungry again or whatever it is, or refuses to give in. Today, there are so many challenges that people face. It's good to have a character there who shows that you can be strong. You can stand for what you believe in. And you can do it.
Well,
She does it in a way that is not objectionable, but it is firm, and she will not back down. And she goes after what she wants.
and I think doing something today is different than doing something during the 9th century, right? Because people like Judith, which is such a great sort of lovely, wonderful thing, by the way, to think about, like, that even this particular person who really existed carved her path against all odds, right? Chose what she wanted and refused to back down from it. So that's, to me, is massive inspiration. If you haven't picked up by now, I am a massive feminist. So, like, that's just who I am. So I think it's definitely easier now to carve your path or to claim your stake in the world, be steel if you need to be, than it would have been for Judith in the 9th century. Because as you have said, religion at that time was law, essentially. If you think about it, like, I don't know a lot, but I know this, right? Like, I'm not Catholic, I'm Protestant, but the religion was the rule of the land. It was the law. It had such great influence and sway. And back then, in the 9th century, for gosh sakes, you had your little echo chambers. You weren't really traveling the world, most people, right? Or all of these different things. So someone like Judith, or, I mean, she was royalty, so she could have seen more than than say common folk in that they only knew what they knew. There seemed to be very little expansion or a chance of expansion of mind or critical thinking, if you will. So that fear, falling out of God's graces or not belonging to a church, like that's your whole, that's your everything, right? And we see this now way less, of course, but we do see that sort of same level of fanaticism exist to a degree in some like smaller parts of the country, the world, that sort of thing, where their echo chambers are very small. But yeah, so for her, the second marriage, yes, was like the catalyst, and rather going to prison, right? What's the difference between one prison and another prison? Well, if she goes to the prison from the king, she's at least by herself and not in a prison where she's being mistreated, if you will. So critics feel the romantic thread is restrained, while some prefer more emotional depth, as I would agree. How did you balance courtly politics with the emotional core? What was that choice? Because I feel like that might have been a choice for you.
Oh, that's difficult. I haven't thought about that. I just was trying to tell the story as accurately as possible and tried to put myself in her situation, and knowing that the royalty also, you can't have, for instance, a commoner approach a royal in a romantic way for the most part without maybe getting in trouble, having his head cut off. There's got to be a certain amount of deference to the royalty. And so there's always this little barrier, emotional barrier almost between them. So it is different. This book is highly populated with royals. There's very few commoners in there.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is a different level, I think, of emotionality.
Yeah, it is very much and it's very much a glimpse in, so it's not even just a glimpse inside the 19th century. It's not simply a love story. It's like accurate recounts of times, but it's also very much a look inside royalty of said time and all the nuances and complications and such that will come along with that. So yeah, and then I guess because I did not realize the extent of historical accuracy in the people per se, right? I thought the characters were not as historically accurate, but power, loyalty, and agency, these are the constant tensions in your novel. How did you approach weaving those themes into both historical and personal drama? But I think we have this question, and this question's not relevant anymore because we know more now than I knew before we started talking, right?
I did not start by thinking I want themes in here. They emerged because of the characters and the choices they made. And at the end of the book, there is an afterword that tells further about each of the characters and some of the choices they went on to make and what their ultimate fate was. And I based each of the characters off their life story or their storyline, so that, for instance, her younger brother, young Charles, just a young child when the book begins, and already forced to be a provincial king at the age of 7 or 8, and thrown into this crazy life of politics already. And he was a jokester. He loved to hunt, but he also loved to play pranks. And eventually it leads to his death. And that you can read about in the afterword. And he dies very young, as like 19, because of a prank that he played on someone. So, so I tried to capture
Oh.
some of that into the personality of the character of young Charles.
So, okay, this is your first book.
It is.
So, I have a question. Do you have plans of writing any other books?
Well, I have started one based on Judith's grandmother, Judith, who she was named for. She had a very interesting story as well. And I've written the first 2 chapters, but then I've stopped to do more research. It's hard for me. I love doing the research, and it's hard for me to know when the research is done. But she was the empress who married. Actually, she was of noble birth, but not of royal birth. And she was chosen by Louis the Pious, Charles's father, and the son of Charlemagne, as his second wife. And how that happens is almost a Cinderella type story. When he becomes widowed, all his courtiers keep pressing him to marry again because they think he's going to relinquish his kingdom to his grown sons and go into an abbey, because he is very pious and he is probably talking about it. And he's sad and he's lost his wife. Well, they hold a bride show and they invite all the nobles to bring their eligible young daughters to the palace at Aix-la-Chapelle, or Aachen in Germany, for this bride show. And he chooses Judith because of her beauty, her musical ability, and her intellect. And everything is fine until she becomes pregnant. Then a lot of tension arises in the court. The tension disperses when she gives birth to a daughter, but then she becomes pregnant again. And the tension builds again. And Charles is born. Now we have an extra son. The 3 grown sons of Louis the Pious, which is Lothar the First, Pippin the First, and Louis the German, have already decided. They've decided how the kingdom is going to be divided when Louis the Pious dies, and they do not want to lose any of that kingdom to this young, new male child. And so it starts a civil war. And they arrest their father, they take him prisoner, they take Empress Judith prisoner, and she basically has to fight for the life and the heritage that she wants for her son. And I'm very inspired by that.
That sounds like an incredible book in the making. So I feel like it's so interesting because you were given this gift, you said, decades ago. And it's like, I don't know if you knew at the time the power it held, right? So, okay, for people at home. So I just had a realization also. You had said at the beginning of the book, this is based on your family lineage. So you are descendant from royalty.
Yes. And they're probably...
How does that make you feel?
I think I had always known that from the time I was a young child. And I remember thinking, so you're saying if I was born 1,000 years ago, I would have been a royal? And my mom would say, yes. And then at the time, I think I had in my mind the Disney princess thought. But then I just forgot about it. And then it was... But at this point, they have so many descendants, I'm sure you might even be a descendant of theirs. if you had traced your genealogy back that far. You never know.
Maybe one day I'll pay to have this done, and we'll find out. Um, I remember in
I
grade
also,
school, nope,
sorry,
high school, sorry.
I also,
Go
the
ahead.
interesting thing about this whole genealogy is they intermarry each other, right? So my ancestor I come through Judith and Baldwin. Their son, Baldwin II, married the daughter of Alfred the Great. Alfred is the one she teaches to read. He is the son of Athelwulf. So I am also related to Athelwulf. I'm also, ironically, related to some of the Vikings, and I'm also related to to Robert the Strong, who is not necessarily the hero of the book. He is a thorn in the side of Charles the Bald for quite some time. But eventually, Robert the Strong's sons become the kings of France. And when the Carolingian dynasty ends, the Robertian dynasty begins. So all these are kind of related, come through several different ones of these.
It's very fascinating, actually, the whole thing. So for people at home, you can purchase The Girl of Many Crowns by D.H. Morris, all major bookstores and online.
Online, especially Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I think they have like a Google Books. I really don't. I'm not as familiar, but you're probably easy. It's easier to just pick up Amazon and have them deliver it.
Fair, fair. And if you are against Amazon, you can go to Barnes and Noble. They're still in good
Yeah.
graces at this moment. But great book so far. I am excited about finishing it now. So if you want a historical fiction, a muted yet beautiful love story, okay, not sensational, and like actual like vivid detail of what it looks like and feels like in the ninth century, buy this book and enjoy this book. It's really, really great. You did such a wonderful job. It was such a pleasure having you here today, DH. And we now have something to look forward to after this book is finished. We have a book coming sometime in the future about Judith's grandmother, Judith, the Empress.
Thank you
All
so
right,
much
so
for having
we're at time. Thank you for being here. The pleasure was all mine. I really thoroughly thank you for the book and the nice touches and the story itself and all the research, the countless hours of research you've put in to write such a beautiful piece. So thank you for being here. I wish you the best. We'll look out for the next the next D.H. Morris historical fiction. And for everyone at home, get out there and live your wildest dreams. So until next time.
For media and sponsorship inquiries, email info@cksims.com or visit cksims.com and fill out the contact form. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. A new episode airs every Saturday. CKS Media.